Hi. There she is. All right, there you are. Okay, all right, you know what? Before you run away from me, I'm going to just pull you up.
Hi.
You have no idea. I've been like so excited about this. I can't even. I'm like, ah.
Okay. The nicest thing anyone's ever wanted me to do. So thank you.
Yes, absolutely. Well, I was just about to kind of introduce this whole thing that I have going on. And now that you're on my split screen, I'm going to look at you when I say it. But so welcome to the Integrative Wellness Collective. It is kind of been this like passion project of mine. And it's really getting together a bunch of amazing practitioners that I know, that I've come to just admire and learn from and just be inspired by. So you were like on the tippy top of my list to get you involved in this crazy scheme of mine. But it's all working out so beautifully, and I'm so excited and blessed to have you here. But I did want to say one thing. You and Amelia are the reason why this is actually happening right now. So I have so much gratitude to you. And if people out there don't know, it was Denise and her daughter that posted a TikTok video that she had placed on Facebook back at the beginning of quarantine. And I remember the tagline. It said something like, the only way that I'm ever going to get my daughter to like hang out with me or something is to like do a video with me. I think that was something like that. And you guys did this little video together, and it was the cutest thing. And I thought, wow, you know what? Like, I can't treat patients right now because of quarantine. How can I get my message of wellness across? So I had this idea, and then I sent you a text, and I'm like, I don't know how to use TikTok. And then
I said, I don't either.
Like, my young kid will totally teach you how to do all the dances. So next thing you know, it's like she teaches me how to use TikTok, and it's now like 8 months later, and I'm 140,000 followers later. And it wasn't until that experience for me that brought me comfortable enough to be live and be on camera. So this is almost like a full circle testament to like how much I owe you for my career trajectory this year. So I'm so appreciative, and I'm so excited to have you here. So let's just tell everybody who you are, because I think you're pretty badass. And so I was like reading your bio, and it's such cool stuff. So you're a master of physical therapy. You own 3 practices, right? In was it Illinois and Wisconsin? Am I reading?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So
wait, do I have to remind you of that one?
I forget. We've been very blessed this year. So there's things that like, over the last 8 months, everything blends together in one. And like, I'm just so blessed. I work with the best people. I have the best team that I work with. And so I just feel like we're one big family. And so sometimes I forget where everybody is. So, but I do have to say, your content, that's why you're so successful. It really has nothing to do with Amelia or me.
She sparked it.
My daughter is brilliant. But I do see your content is stellar. Like, you have inspired a lot of people, I think. And I think the ability to talk about things that, like constipation, that everybody deals with, I think is really brave. And I just wish our industry was more accepting of, and I think you've inspired me a lot about being an acupuncturist, how you view things as both a PT and an acupuncturist. I think that the absence of illness is not just the way to look at wellness, because I think that's what our society does. And so I think the things you're talking about are going to keep people healthy and moving and happy. And that's really where I think our industry should go, is looking more at wellness. So I love what you're doing, and I'm grateful that I've been a little part of it. So thank you.
Well, a big part of it. So thank you. Yeah. So let me finish introducing you and your badassery. So you also teach kinesiology at a local college, right? And you're a master of science. You have your manual therapies. You're a manual therapist within the world of physical therapy. And like, the big reason why I have you on here selfishly is because you are this master educator of the pose method of running, which is how you and I met a few years ago. And in New York. Yeah, in New York. And I just remember like listening to you speak up there. I so admired you as a teacher, and it inspired me as a runner. And every time, I have a blip, I'm like, help me, Denise, what am I doing wrong? So I'm so grateful. So I want to start out with asking a few questions that kind of been in my mind, and I've been putting out on Instagram land a bunch of questions to people and kind of seeing where their reaction is going. So, statistically, can we just talk about, because this is something I remember when you first taught the course, you actually opened with this, about the incidences of running injuries, and like talk to us about that, because I feel like I'm always injured all season long. So,
and you're not alone, 85%. And now we are starting to see the number come down actually a little bit. But I'm going to say it's probably now 70 to 75% of recreational runners are injured every single year. And so we talk about this stat of, concussions. What percentage of injuries are concussions? It's 1%. But what is all we ever talk about are concussions. So it's like the industry shifts to like, what is the biggest issue? And somehow running always gets left out of that.
Meanwhile, it's something that everyone does.
Yes.
It's like everyone we learn how to run as children, right? So,
and everyone thinks like, okay, I'm gonna become healthy, or it's the pandemic, my gym is closed. What am I gonna do? I'm gonna put on some running shoes and go run. And so what happened was nobody had worked or understood really. The industry does not allow for people to understand that there's a skill to running. There's a skill in every other sport. I watch my little kids play volleyball and baseball, and there's a set of skills that the coaches teach them. Right. And running seems to be something where technique just flies out the window, and everyone's like, well, I got my new running shoes, I got my Nike, whatever, and now I'm just going to go hit the road and I'm going to be good. And inevitably, once they start increasing their mileage, that's when the problems start happening.
Right.
And then they say, well, maybe I just need new shoes, or maybe I need to do this, or get compression socks. And they don't understand that there's actually like a skill to learning how to run.
Yeah. So it's interesting because I actually decided to go in my closet right before this and pile up all of the shoes that I've amassed over the last few years, because it's the latest, the greatest, the zero drops, the high drops, the thick sole, the thin sole, the carbon plates, the mesh, all the stuff. And I'm afraid to look there, but I think I have 12 pairs of sneakers. And I've injured myself in every single one of them. And it wasn't until, you taught me this, it's like the beginning of every season, I actually do a videotape of myself from the back, from the front, from the side, because of you. And I do that so I can literally look at myself in my running form and saying, okay, am I doing everything biomechanically efficient? Because the minute you start breaking down in that biomechanical efficiency is the minute you start compensating, and there comes the injury.
Correct.
So I'm going to segue this as a PT for you. What's the number one running injury that you come across in your practice, and even as a running coach?
Can I give you a top 3 instead?
Okay, yeah. Give me a top 3, yep.
I would say some form of hamstring injury, whether it's like right in the middle of the hamstring, or more likely, that was why I brought it up for you, or right kind of at the bottom of the butt. People don't know if they really have butt pain or high hamstring pain. That one, and then I would say like a foot issue, so plantar fasciitis, or what you and I know as posterior tibialis tendonitis, so kind of pain on that medial heel, which sometimes can get confused for plantar fasciitis, but can be its own thing. And I would say knee pain.
Yeah, for sure. So then, I would have to say too, in my world, because I treat more triathletes than I treat just strict runners. But one of the things that I see, I think in like the progression of things, I would say like Achilles tendinopathies, overuse, some sort of calf strain, obviously your knee issue. And, lately a lot of like snapping hips. And that's another issue with that lower cross, which we could talk about later, which I find really fascinating, especially in some of the videos that I've been doing lately about really targeting running and seeing like flexibility versus mobility versus stiffness, right? So we're seeing a lot of this, people think they know how to run, but there's this really interesting thing where when a little girl in particular goes through puberty, due to, more fat mass, due to her Q angle. So, for those of you that don't know what a Q angle is, just this width, a woman's hips or a young girl's hips gets wider. So the angle that comes in, that goes to the patella, the kneecap, widens. So it creates more shearing effect on the knees. And then you have this higher incidence of ACL injuries in high school girls, which is interesting because so many of them have, play soccer. So with that in mind, that and the snapping hip. So what do you do as a running coach and a PT? Like what are some of the main things that you instruct your clients in or your patients in to avoid some of these things?
Oh, number one is just them understanding the perception of movement. Like you can't know what you're doing wrong without an example of what someone is doing right. And so you can look at different examples. If you take videos of some of the most elite runners out there, you'll start seeing patterns of movement. And so we start with video analysis because I don't think people understand, you think you look one way and then you watch the video and you're like, I'm totally doing what I didn't think I was doing. And so starting with perception of understanding how you move. What does it feel like to focus on the back leg? We always worry about the landing leg, but the leg that comes through, that pulling leg, is usually the culprit of half of these problems. So getting them to even be able to perceive that back leg. So that's where we start, is just what do you feel? What is your brain aware of? And most of my running coaching is training the brain. Not even training the body, it's training the brain on what movement needs to look like and what, more importantly, it feels like. Because when it feels good, you'll replicate it. And you'll be able to do it better. Because I know you've had these experiences, because I remember watching you in our class, that all of a sudden everyone will get this high from that was so easy and I felt so light on
effortless.
Yeah, that was effortless. And that's when the motor pathways start really understanding and adapting that new movement pattern, is that they're like, that felt awesome. That was so easy and so good. And that's really what our goal is as running technique specialists, is to get people to understand how do you move and how do you replicate that over and over and over again, so you can either be faster or run longer or avoid an injury altogether.
Right. And I have to totally agree with that. And I think learning a new pattern, it's always kind of like, what am I doing? Like, this feels really, I don't know if I can engage that. Or I've had plenty of patients lately. What I'm realizing too is how many of them have a weak glutes, right? So to get someone to actually feel, their back body, it's kind of like, well, it's back there. I can't see it unless I'm looking in a mirror. I really can't contract it, right?
You'll hear them say well, somebody told me that my hamstrings just won't turn on, or my glute won't turn on. And you're like, well, listen, your hamstring or your glutes are turning on, but you need to change how you perceive what that feels like. So you're absolutely right. Just feeling that muscle do its job in running is different than in other sports. And so, like you just said, just understanding how to get that to do its job. Yeah. It's funny, just when I went out for my run today, I was like, let's see if I could squeeze my buns while I'm running. And I was like what? Wait, what? How do I do this? It was like, I was so in my habitual pattern was somewhere else. And we're going to talk about this later about the falling part of the gait. But it was really interesting to say to my brain, okay, this is actually what I want to feel in my movement right now. And then the connection between the brain and that muscle, it's almost like the GPS mapping system is off, right? So it's like my Waze wasn't working, and it was like, can we just take a detour? And a lot of times that detour is actually compensatory, right? So then you get injured, and then you're at square zero, you're like, and I'm injured again, right? Because I can't feel X, Y, and Z, or I can't, what you said, turn that on. So segue into, what is the pose method? I know it, but I don't know if our audience knows it. So The pose method was developed by one of my favorite people in the whole wide world, Dr. Nicholas Romanoff, who's a sports scientist. And he started looking at, this was back in the 70s when they still had film strips. So he started looking at what are all these elite runners doing the same, and trying to find patterns, and noticed that there were poses that people moved in and out of when they were running. And so he developed a systematic approach to teaching people how to efficiently move in and out of these poses. And the more efficient you become, the less likely you are to waste energy or waste extra movement, which can cause injuries. You can be faster, you can run longer, because you're harnessing these natural energies that are part of our body. Gravity, some bad things like ground reaction force, and this springiness or this muscle tendon elasticity that's in our system. We just have to learn how to use it. And so the pose method is how to teach people how to reproduce this through drills that are very easy to do, just to help change your perception of movement so that you can reproduce a proper movement over and over and over again over time. So there's that perception again.
It's always learning new motor patterns, and even but I find that like patients that come in, after an injury, right, that learning the new motor pattern to get them to move again. Like, I don't know if in PT school, after PT school, I worked in traumatic brain injuries and spinal cord injuries. And, it's so interesting to see someone when they have to relearn a motor pattern like eating, or I mean, obviously walking or rolling or getting out of bed, doing something that we take for granted. And I remember back in PT school, we had this teacher that gave us a challenge. And he said, I want you to wake up tomorrow morning and I want you to do everything on your non-dominant side. You had to get out of bed on your non-dominant side. You had to put your pant leg on your non-dominant side. You had to chew on your non-dominant side. You had to use so it was exhausting. I think by like 9 a.m., I'm like, I need to take a nap because my motor pattern wasn't wired that way yet. So when you have an injury or when you want to change someone's gait pattern, it's exhausting because it's learning this whole new system again. Okay, so let's go back now to, I want to talk to you a little bit about running shoes. And I did a post on running shoes maybe a few weeks ago. And again, it was all about this, like, it doesn't matter what the shoe looks like, it really has to do with your biomechanics. But do you, when somebody comes in and says to you, hey Denise, I just, found these newest, latest and greatest $300 pair of sneakers, is it going to make me faster? What's because I remember when I took your course, you were like, you need to do the 0 drops. You need to have like the lowest drop. And I did, and I actually wound up loving my ultras for a long time, and then I wound up with some sort of neuroma. And then I went back to a higher drop. So, what's your suggestion on that in terms of shoes and sneakers?
Well, I think the reason we had talked with ultras or 0 drops with you was, as you were, some other things that were happening in your running, and so I think the general rule is fix your running form first. Yeah. And then get your shoe. And I appreciate that people want to try to save money, but if you can go to a specialty store and have somebody actually fit you, that's key. Sure. Yeah. So I don't think you need to have the most expensive shoe to be a good runner. To just give everybody a really quick example, I'm learning how to golf. It's not pretty. Not pretty at all. I know you're a good golfer, so I know you'll appreciate this. My husband's a great golfer, and so I don't care what club I go by. Until I fix my swing or my understanding on how the swing should look, my ball is going to keep slicing to the right. I can buy a $300 driver and my ball is going to keep slicing to the right. So until I figure out how to actually swing the club, now once I get good at it, then I can maybe buy a really good club that will maybe get me fixed 50 extra yards. Yeah. And the shoes are the same way. So fix your form first, understand the mechanics of it, and then find that shoe that helps you. Now, we have these debates about, was the 2-hour marathon mark broken because he was wearing carbon-plated shoes? Who knows? Like, he was 20 seconds off the first time he tried it. Right. To shave 20 seconds off when you're that elite, was it really shoes? Nike is going to say yes because it's their product.
But didn't he have like 20 pacers in front of him? Well, like, they were in formation, so it was aerodynamic, right?
That was a lot of during the trial, not when he actually broke it.
Okay,
he broke it during a race.
Yep,
so, I guess you just have to, my rules on shoes are, is it comfortable? Like, could you walk around your town and feel pretty comfortable? Right. Does it not have too much cushioning? And the reason for not too much cushioning is that can inhibit your perception of movement. So if you have something with a really thick heel, you're not going to be able to feel your foot. Right. Try running outside on the ground and see how you run then, and put very thick cushioned shoes on and run and see if you're
totally different.
And the third one is, do you like the color? Because if you think your shoes are ugly, you're never going to wear them. So just find shoes that you think are fun to wear and that are comfortable for you, and just start with that. Then you're really trying to get to the next level. Then you can work with a running shoe specialty store, and they'll help you get to that next level.
But it's funny too, like I talked to a patient of mine about last week. We were talking about the drops of the shoes, and a lot of people, if they don't have the proper running form, many of them heel strike. So a lot of the higher drop or the bigger wedge shoes, they actually promote that more of a heel strike.
I was just looking to see if I had one that I could show.
Oh, I do. Hold on.
In your 12 shoes.
I'm like, how many pairs, right? So
okay. So
we got
Hoka's are Hokas are notorious for this. So for people to understand, a drop is the difference between the back of the shoe where the heel is and the front of the shoe. So they can vary for anywhere between 0 drop where it's level to, I think you've got your ultras. I can take my.
I do. Hold on. Wait, I think I'm wearing them. Hold on. I'm wearing my ultras. Look at the difference. Okay, wait. Here we go.
Yes. So you can see the shoe in Bianca's right hand is a 0 drop. So there's no difference in height between the back of the shoe and the front of the shoe. Whereas the one on her left hand, I'm going to guess that might be like a 8 to 10 millimeter drop.
Yeah.
And so the difference is a cushioning.
Right.
So what is padding that heel is a ton of cushioning.
Right.
And so, yes, the 85% of runners are rear foot strikers or heel foot strikers. I don't really care what part of your foot hits the ground. I care about where it lands in relationship to the rest of your body weight, because that's when injuries can happen. Yeah. But the shoe companies are geniuses. They are smart. It's about marketing. Oh, it hurts? Let's pad your heel. Let's pad where you're making the most impact and make your foot feel really good. But all that force is still traveling up. And so that's why we see such a high incidence of knee pain, ankle pain, low back pain, because all that force still has to transfer. It doesn't magically go somewhere. You can't stop force. It's just redirected. So it just redirects further up your leg.
Right. And I always say it's like wherever your weakest link is where all that load is going to find its way.
Usually your knee.
Yeah, it's usually, your knee's the crankiest. Yeah. So can you take everyone through take us through the pose itself? Like what exactly is it? What happens?
So there is only one pose in running that we should really worry about.
The method, the pose method.
Well, once you understand what the goal is, which is the one pose, then we understand the elements that make up that one pose. Okay. So the one pose is where, can I use you as my model?
Okay. It's the figure 4, yes?
Figure 4. So really it's one leg up and one leg down.
Yeah, hold on. So let me move my 5,000 pairs of shoes right now. I don't want to trip on them. All right. I don't know if you can see me because it's like kind of a half screen.
That's okay. I think if you could just stand right where you are, it's enough.
Can you see me?
Yep. Okay. So if we were to look at Bianca, we'll see that she has, if I were to drop a line, oh, perfect. Yeah. Just pick your one foot up behind you into that running pose. Yeah. There you go. So one leg up and one leg down. This is all we do as runners. We always have one leg up and one leg down. You never have both feet on the ground. And if we could see her ear, I could drop an imaginary plumb line down her ear, through her shoulder, through her hip, and down through her foot. So the goal is to get in and out of that position as quickly as possible. Yeah. And so what we do is we want runners thinking about that back leg. Too often everybody thinks about the landing leg. Right. The key to success with this is how do we get that back leg in, pulling forward quick enough from the ground. Yep. And so we do drills that teach people how to perceive that foot coming from behind them underneath they're going to pull it forward or pull it in so that the hamstring gets to do its job. Hamstring's super happy and we're efficient in our movements. We don't need you taking this big stride out. Everyone thinks you have to take these huge strides, stride it out. I work a ton with middle schoolers and it's great because middle schoolers, some of them have gone through puberty and some of them haven't. And so like you were talking about the Q angle and the width of the pelvis, especially for females, part of the issue with puberty is that you now have a longer limb or maybe wider hips and you just don't know how to control that new movement. Mm-hmm. Again, it's perception of what you look like, perception of how you start caring in middle school too, what people think of you. And so we try to move the way that we think is cool, and that can cause problems in itself. So just understanding how to efficiently get in and out of that running pose. Mm-hmm. You do that with a pulling mechanism. So using your hamstring to pull your foot up off the ground, and then you move forward by falling. So we have gravity. So let's use our body weight to our advantage. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that's probably one of my favorite drills that I do. Okay, so let's go back to, you were just saying about, middle school and your, either the competitiveness or the fear of being watched or the fear of getting slower. It's interesting because, I don't know if you're on Strava and I'm not going to denounce Strava, But as an athlete and as a competitive athlete, sometimes Strava can be a really big detriment, especially when you're coming off of an injury. At least this is my experience, right? So I'm right now in a base building phase of my, my first month of training, and going from like, a stagnancy over COVID and quarantine to now starting to ramp up and build up. And, and I had a conversation today with one of my patients who's an extraordinary runner. And, we were talking about like this low aerobic zone training, and, he's just this super fast, speedy guy. And I'm like, you know what? Like, you're 60, you may want to like not, right? Strava, right? Julie, totally agree on Strava. So what we were talking about it, and he's like, I don't know if I could like put those times down because I'm running like a 9.5 minute mile. And I'm thinking, I would kill for a 9.5 minute mile right now.
The average person would be on like
miles. All right. And I said to him, but can we just talk about how often you are injured? So the point is here is that we're like big little kids at this age, right? We go on Strava and it's like we're on the playground.
Well, you care what everybody thinks.
Look at how slow they're running today. And you're like, and then you go on there and you're like, oh my God, I'm swimming slow, I'm biking slow, I'm running slow. And then we feel the need that we have to like say why, and I'm totally guilty of that, right? Like, I'm so slow today because blah, blah, blah. But, this is what happens, as adults. And then you wind up getting injured. And then you wind up staying injured.
And then everyone around you thinks, they won't talk about being injured either then.
Right.
So that's why I just right. And really, if we started talking about this as a collective group, I do think we could get our injury rates down. I do think we're starting to see it come down because I think, I think more people are willing to talk about injuries, but I don't think there's anything wrong with showing a little vulnerability to be like, dude, I'm totally hurt. Because once we post these things that we're injured, you'll all of a sudden see everybody like, I had that too.
Yeah.
So I just think instead of it being like this competitive thing, I think it could be a bonding time. And that's my issue with Strava, which is why I'm not on it. And I usually will have my injured athletes just come off of it. Yeah. Because they'll be like, do you know how much I was running this time last year?
Yeah. Well, you're not who you were now, who you were then.
Right. Totally. So I just think it's just my issue with social media too, and the amount of stress it puts on in our lives.
For sure.
But I think if you're injured, there's nothing wrong with asking for a little advice, because you never know who's going to say that one little thing that fixes it for you.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so I wanted to take this now into, I wanted to talk to you about the importance of warm-ups. And I think it was either the beginning of what's today? Wednesday. It was last week. I did a post on warm-ups. And I like doing these posts, believe it or not. Sometimes it takes me like 2 hours to get a post up because I'm so deep in the trenches of research, and I'm like PubMed and, this medical research and that medical research. And I'm like, I got to get to work, and I've got to stop posting on social media right now because I'm completely immersed in, learning something. Right. So what I found really interesting about warm-ups, which I'm so guilty of this, I have a finite amount of time to work out, right? I've got to get my workout in, and I'm like, no, I don't have time for a workout because I got to hit that pace. I got to hit that number. I got to hit that time.
I got to get my mileage in for this week, or I only got 20 minutes between my patients. Like, I got to go now.
Yes. Yeah. So how important, or in your experience of treating patients and coaching, like, what do you find in terms of warming up and the importance of it and the injury prevention, really?
Right. And I think that's where it really is the injury prevention side of it. So I can't remember what study I was reading where they figured out it takes about 8 minutes for you to get the blood circulating to the bone, which is usually what needs the most love, because the muscles have blood flowing through them very rapidly. So the bone is really where a lot of these issues come up, the stress fractures, things like that. Yeah. And so the way we look at it is use that 8 to 10 minutes as a technique workout, and do that as your warm up. So let's say you have to get 5 miles done for your training plan. Maybe your first mile is drill and then follow it with a run. Drill, run, drill, run, drill, run. So you can get your technique going on, your technique training going on, you can get your warm up going on, and then your mileage. You're not having to like do a warm up and then still get your 5 miles. Like, combine them together.
Adding it in together.
Yeah. And so skipping, running backwards, karaoke. I mean, everyone thinks we are weirdos anyway because we run.
Right.
So what does it hurt to do a couple drills in your neighborhood or on the sidewalk?
Yeah.
That can help improve your perception of how you're moving, improve your strength, improve your technique, and get your warm up done so that you can finish your other 4 miles and you're ready to go. You're warmed up and you feel like in a better movement pattern. It feels easier. You feel lighter on your feet because you really honed your body in on the technique side of it.
Yeah.
So that's how you warm up.
I was training a high school girl over the summer, and it was so funny because I was like, she just kept getting injured. And I was really talking to her about using the drills, as you're saying, like if you're doing 3 miles, let's just do half a mile of drills. She literally said to me, I'll do them in my backyard because I can't let anybody see me skipping down the street. And I'm like, wow, meanwhile I'm out there, I have like 2 different colored socks on, like a hat, my hair's sticking out like I'm a crazy person, and I'm like jumping around with my, whatever. It's so funny what happens with perception again, though, right? Like, what do we look like when we're out there? Do we look fast enough? That was my injured athlete earlier. He's like, I can't run slow. It's, I want to run fast. So, everyone in the neighborhood knows me as a guy that runs fast, So I'm like, well, what are they going to say? Oh my God, he's running slow. Like, whatever, the judgment's there. It's on their own. All right, so let's go into, I did post some things on social media, some on Instagram stories, and I got some questions. So let's kind of go through a little bit of those. One person asked, this is interesting, why does running make my whole body seem like it loses flexibility?
I'm gonna say because of the impact, the forces that are working on our body. Okay. I think if you're not controlling those forces the right way, everything just stiffens up because they're not used to transmitting those forces. Our muscles are what's designed to accept that force. And if you're taking too big of a stride or overstriding or not being efficient in your movement, the bones are what end up absorbing that force, or the joints. And that just causes stiffness. I would say the second thing about that is that most people don't do mobility work. You were great about posting mobility stuff to do, and there's a couple other running coaches that just put some amazing stuff out there. Kelly Starrett from WAD, understanding the role of mobility. I think that's the cue. And what's the first thing that we all say? Like, oh, I feel so stiff. Mm-hmm. It's not like I feel unflexible. It's my joints feel stiff. So I think mobility work. I have a mobility routine that I put all my runners through. It takes about a minute and a half. And you're just trying to work on, can I get a little bit more range of motion with each rep? So 3 to 5 reps on each leg, whether you're lunging really deep to the side or a deep lunge forward or like that figure 4 squat down to work. If you're focusing on the joint, let's get some range of motion in there. I think mobility work and technique can really help take away some of the stress from the joints and the muscles that lead to that stiffness.
Yeah. That's a good one. And I do try to do some mobility work, but again, it's like finding the time, right? Because it's like, okay, if I have 1 hour to run, I've got this amount of mileage. I'm going to now get in a warm up. I'm now going to get a mobility drills. Before you know it, it's like, I'm going to have 20 minutes to run and I'm not going to be able to do it, right? But I think that's a great idea. And also, I posted something last week, which was interesting too, about the flexibility of the big toe as well as dorsiflexion in the ankle. Mm-hmm. And, the statistics where it's like you need at least a minimum of 30 degrees of dorsiflexion in the big toe and the ankle joint. So there's our mobility again, right? So it's like if you could work that, your toes are super important too. And if they're rigid and you're not moving, you're going to really, compress the whole foot structure. And then there goes, up the chain again.
But I think too, if you could just work on mobility and stability of your foot and ankle. I mean, I think our runners, you and I know the difference between 10 degrees and 30 degrees, but most runners don't know the difference between 20 degrees of extension or flexion either way. They don't know what that means. And so if they just have a strong and mobile foot, that can hold their body weight on one leg, then they've done their job. Our job is to work on those minute things. Right. But, there are runners that don't have a lower leg. They're running in a prosthetic leg. Right. So if you can be stable and strong in all of your joints, whatever ones you have.
That's right.
I think that's really where the control comes into this.
Yeah. Cool. core stability, trunk control. Yeah, it's interesting. And then also, just to add to that flexibility or feeling inflexible part, was going back to the warm-ups again, right? So in my deep dive of PubMed research on warm-ups, I was actually shocked to find that your DOMS, your delayed onset muscle soreness, can actually decrease by warming up. So if you
it was a great study on that one, yes.
Right? I was reading it and I'm like, wait a minute, so I don't have to be sore for like 3 days after a really hard workout. I did the West Point half marathon like 4 years ago. I could not even sit on a toilet seat for like, I don't even know, like 5 days afterwards. Yeah. And I was so immobile and so stiff, but I mean, did I warm up? Probably not. And it was a super hilly course. So anyway, so that was my experience of that, but I found that research really interesting. Okay, second question. Somebody posted how to avoid knee pain post-run. What are you finding? And this, again, is probably going to have to do with biomechanical movements during the running gait. So
yeah, everyone always hates that I say this, but it all comes down to form.
Yes.
The knee can usually, the knee's the weakest link, like we said.
Yeah.
It's most of the time, whether you're hurting during the run, after the run. Sometimes people only have knee pain at the beginning of the run, and then once they get going, it goes away. Usually knee pain is a result of poor mechanics. So it's usually that you're overstriding, you're landing with your foot too far ahead of your body weight. Is usually the biggest culprit of knee pain.
Mm-hmm. And then going back to the lower cross that we talked about earlier when we were talking, the trigger point of the rectus femoris, right, the primary muscle of the quad, for those of you that don't know, I know you know obviously, refers to the kneecap. So what's fascinating to me is sometimes patients will come in and, I'll put my acupuncture hat on, my PT hat, like they kind of go both ways when in a session. And I'll say, oh, you have knee pain. I don't touch their knee. I'm actually just releasing their high rectus femoris almost up by the hip. And they're like, well, what is that? I'm like, well, the trigger point is a referral that feels like under the kneecap pain. So clearly you're overusing your quadriceps during your run. Your hip flexors are very tight and your glutes are out to lunch. Yeah. Right? I mean, the glutes are not firing, going back to the beginning of our talk. And I have one patient right now, I don't know if she's on here, she said she's going to join us today, but she always has pain in her left glute after her run. And it's always after. So obviously if it's one-sided, she's compensating somehow, her lower back, her hamstring is tight on that side. She's overacting the piriformis.
Or even maybe she's too weak on the opposite side.
Right.
So glutes have to try to counterbalance that your hip or quadratus lumborum muscle. So,
keep your pelvis level.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's what
she definitely has.
When we do the video analysis from the front and the back, we'll see this hip drop on the weak side all the time, especially when that foot's in the air, the whole leg will drop down on that weak side.
Yeah.
And so it's a key indicator, like you are just not, your pelvis can't hold its own weight from one side to the other. So glutes on one side, quadratus on the other, just not.
She's here. That's her. Yes, I'm talking about you. You just jumped out at the right time. So wait, let me just show everyone what a hip drop is, right? So you're talking about keeping a neutral pelvis. When you lift that leg, you're going to see a drop.
Yep.
Right? So when this drops, you're weaker here on this gluteus medius because this needs to pull everything up to keep it stationary and level.
Well, and sometimes even too, your weak left side can't hold its own weight up. So it's usually that counterbalance between the two, which is why we make our runners do a lot of single leg strengthening.
Yes.
Because you have to be able to, we're always on one leg, going back to why balance is important and things like that. So really getting both sides to do their job.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so another question was, any tips for soleus pain? So for those of you out there that don't know what the soleus is, it's a muscle that's deep to the big calf muscle. It's your primary vertical mover, right? It helps you jump and get vertical mobility. What do you treat? How do you treat that?
Well, first of all, it's one of my favorite muscles. And the other thing is that a lot of times people with a soleus problem get diagnosed with an Achilles problem.
Yep.
And the reason for that, so again, there's two reasons. One comes down to landing too far ahead of your body weight. So you're landing on a locked ankle and a locked knee. and there's tension through that soleus in the back, and it's not meant to do that job. It's meant to be an eccentric stabilizer of the ankle, so that lowering, not a stopping the force.
Right.
The other thing is that people think about pushing off. Like you said, its job is a vertical mover. And so people will try to push off when they're running.
Yep.
And if you push off when you're running, that muscle, along with your gastroc, sends you, or your calf muscle, send you up. Do we want to go up as runners? That's like wasted vertical oscillation.
Yep.
And if you have like a Garmin, you'll see, it'll say like vertical oscillation or vertical displacement. You'll see this number of coming up and down. On a video analysis, we'll see people's head kind of bobbing up and down. And so the soleus pain, that that feeling where people are like, I just keep stretching my calf and I can't get it to release. It's usually because you're asking this small little muscle to try to drive the entire body forward. And what it does is it catapults it up.
Yeah.
And so landing with a locked ankle in front of you or trying to push off is where the soleus just gets mad, because it's not the way it's designed to work.
Yeah. I was also reading about the soleus being, my coach calls me Tigger. That's funny.
Bouncy.
Yeah. And I was reading that the soleus is more of a slow twitch muscle, right? Versus the gastroc being more of a fast twitch muscle. So I think what happens is when you force a slow twitch muscle to just be super dynamic, you're going to break it down and cause all sorts of, inflammation, irritation, micro trauma, the whole thing. So then you wind up with these, and then it bleeds into the whole Achilles, and then your whole joints off and so on. Okay. Yeah. Next question. What does a person with hip instability do if they can only walk? She actually wanted to know what kind of warm up, and it was yoga or stretching. I think this is more from a physical therapy standpoint. So if you have a person with hip instability, and she's actually, I know who this is. She's not a geriatric patient, which is somebody maybe you would think, but she's younger. I think she's probably in her 30s with some instability. Maybe
you know how many females have hip instability? Like and you and I have talked about this, about the role of the pelvic floor. Like I could go into a whole thing about females not understanding how to control their pelvis. I mean, and especially new moms or postpartum, like there's so many issues, especially in the way our culture forces women back. Like, oh, you're 6 weeks, you can go back to running. When you still have to rehab from having this baby, your poor body just went through some serious trauma, whether you had a C-section or a vaginal birth, or sometimes both.
Yeah.
Like you tried to deliver vaginally and then they ended up cutting you open anyway. So I think the hip instability, I'm not shocked that it's somebody that's not 80. I wish that we could talk about these issues more openly. And so I think if you're a walker or a runner, single leg balance is key to having a good stable thing. And if you're a female, working with understanding how your pelvic floor needs to act and control that bottom half of our body. So I'm sorry, I totally want to soapbox with that one. But
no, I completely agree with you. But I think anybody, even men, can't find their pelvic floor. Yeah. Like it is just no man's land down there. No pun intended, right? Last week we talked a little bit about that with like diaphragmatic breathing, belly breathing. And then it was like, instead of using their pelvic floor, they're lifting from their diaphragm, which is the top of the cylinder. So it's like, how are you getting that control, right? And then they wind up with groin pain because they're overusing their adductors. And it's like, the pectineus and all the muscles that feed that whole inner area. So yeah, totally agree with that in terms of the pelvic floor. So, okay, with the instability. So single leg stance, working on stability, working on balance boards. Yeah.
And especially too, the hip is a 3-dimensional movement. So it's a ball and socket. So it moves in 3 directions. It's not like the knee that's just a hinge.
Yeah.
So if we sometimes forget the role of these mobile joints, that it's meant to move front to back, side to side, in rotation. Runners, we always just go one way. We are just going forward.
Yeah.
And so working on rotational movements and diagonal movements and side to side movements. We make our runners move in all 3 planes of movement, even though we're only moving forward. Your joints still have to function in that, because we live our life other than running. I know some of us only want to run all the time, but we do other things. And so that instability, maybe with one movement versus the other, can take its toll and pull on those muscles, causing things to then worsen. Now you're walking or running, causing more stress to that joint.
Yeah. Okay, this is an interesting question. Somebody just popped on the screen. I don't know if you can see it, but it says, "Can you demonstrate how to fix overreaching when running? How can you self-correct foot landing?"
Well, I think that's my girl Melissa.
Oh,
So,
all right.
so I would say the biggest thing about overreaching is that it happens. Your foot is always going to come down, and too often we think about that front foot. So if people can just take a step back and think about the back foot, I think you'll automatically see that front. If you have better timing of the back foot, the front foot will land closer underneath your body weight because it has to. It won't have time to take this big stride out. You're going to, where we land on our foot is secondary to where we're landing in relationship to our body weight. So if we force the timing of the back leg, the front leg will do exactly what it's supposed to do. So if you're finding yourself taking these really huge strides, focus on the back leg, focus on pulling that back leg. Do things like skipping, where really the goal of skipping is to pick that back leg up. The front leg goes down. And so don't overthink some of these things that are just going to happen naturally for you.
Sure.
Think about the things that you can control, like that back leg.
Okay. Another good question, and we're going to wrap up really soon because we've taken your time, plenty of your time.
It's okay.
But breathing. That was a question that came through. It's like, how can you help with breathing efficiency? Because I even struggle with this, right?
I do too. And I am not a breathing technique specialist. There are people that are trained in this. The only thing I say, and I know there's all these breathing mechanism classes that you can take, and I'm not well versed in this to talk about it. But like, I get so excited. I like talk super fast, and then I don't breathe. And so I think the same thing happens when I'm running. I know it happens when I'm working on my patients. I'm trying to just like connect with what I'm doing. And so a lot of times I end up holding my breath. Yeah. So when I'm focusing, I hold my breath.
Yeah.
I think that I probably do the same thing when I'm running. So I think I'm not alone in that we will sometimes hold our breath. And so what I've started doing is singing when I'm running. That's or great. Like mouthing along to some words because it's forcing my breathing. Sure. I read somewhere that you should never breathe out of your mouth when you're running. You should only breathe through your nose. And I have a very hard time with that. I really struggle. So that's what I'm trying to tackle. And granted, here in Chicago, I'm going to guess it's pretty similar in New York, that it's like 20 degrees sometimes when I'm running. Yeah. And it hurts to inhale through I'm very sensitive to that. So I'll notice that I'm breathing because my gaiters will be soaking wet. So I'll notice that I am mouth breathing. And so I really do try to breathe through my nose, or I find that I'm holding my breath too. So I guess my one piece of advice on breathing is, are you even breathing?
Right.
Are you able to take a deep breath in through your nose, but blow out through your mouth? Mm-hmm. And because a lot of people will get those side stitches because they're not breathing out.
That's right. It's interesting because I had one of my kids, or my high school kids, she kept getting side stitches. And I said, whenever that happens, I want you to force exhalation. And
blow out those candles.
Yeah. Like really force it out. And it was like this like whole expansion of the diaphragm, get the rib to mobilize. And then all of a sudden, the muscles get flooded with oxygen and you're now breathing again, right? And the side stitch goes away. So it all goes back to that just efficiency of breath, efficiency of diaphragmatic movement, and your abdomen and your core. Yeah, there's so much to think about when we run, but yet going back to that 75% injury rate, of course, right? Because we really don't know how to run. We're running like we did when we were 5.
Right, and your body's different than when you were 5.
That's right.
So, yes.
Okay. This was an interesting thing, and I was like, maybe they don't know, but can running help stabilize the core, and is it considered weight bearing?
Yes, it's considered weight bearing. Would you agree? I would say yes.
Oh my God, yeah. And I had to actually write her back to ask if that was actually the question that she was asking, because I mean, it's obvious to us as PTs, right? But I think the majority of people don't necessarily understand what weight bearing is. Right. So I was like, yeah, absolutely. Running is weight bearing, lower extremity weight bearing, right? I mean, your arms aren't weight bearing. So, nothing's really happening here except for maybe a little wind resistance. And then I was thinking about the stability of the core, because here I go down that rabbit hole of, my research again. And I'm like, Well, it's the chicken and the egg, right? Yes, by doing these micro motions of rotation when you're running and using your arms, you are actually doing a core workout, essentially. But in order to get more efficient and stable in your core, you should be doing core stability work,
Correct.
balance drills, all the things, figure four, on all fours, like getting into that core and pelvic floor again.
And I think most people think of the core as just your abs.
Right.
But I think if you think about the core as anything basically between your shoulders and your knees.
Yes.
The core's role in running is to connect the upper body to the lower body and be a transmitter of force.
Right.
So there are great power in your shoulders. A lot of runners will lock their shoulders back and down,
Yes.
and then they're like struggling through when really your shoulders are meant to help you transmit energy up and down. And so people can really feel their core when they're efficient through shoulders and legs. Yeah. And the other time they'll really feel their core engage is if they're in just the right body angle with that falling forward. Yep. Because the core is meant to then stabilize that. And so I think if we take a step back, like you said, and understand how to train the core as runners, working on all fours, working in kneeling, working in half kneeling, you don't have to just do crunches. Especially as a runner, there's so many different ways to work your core, thread the needle type exercises that you can really feel that connection between the lower body and the upper body. That I think it's a really powerful, cool thing to feel that stability that happens when everything's working together, from the pelvic floor to the glutes to the transverse abdominis muscle, that one that wraps around your stomach, to even like some of your shoulder blade stabilizer muscles. When all of that's doing its job, you're going to feel light on your feet. Yeah. And you're going to feel effortless. You'll be able to run farther without having to work so hard.
Yeah, and it's like when I think about what an efficient runner looks like, there's just this like fluidity to them, but lightness, right? Yeah. And then you can pick somebody out, anybody running, who's like super stiff and super inefficient, and they're kind of, you could, like, they're plodding along, but they're using so much muscle energy, and they're so wasted that they're gassed by the end of their run, and then they wind up, there's injury again. And I remember back taking your course, I remember that one thing we were doing skipping drills, and you were forcing me to actually use my shoulders to help me skip. And it was like, oh my God, I can't believe how much air I'm taking just by taking it with my shoulders. And it was, again, that like perception of how do I get air in a skip without loading my legs so much. Yeah, without driving these, giant legs that the muscular legs that I have. And I'm like, wait, I could just do that? Yeah. And that was like such an interesting body perception experience, I
tell everybody, watch Usain Bolt run. I mean, he's so beautiful to watch run anyway, but watch him run, watch what his shoulders, and you'll see from the side view, almost this like, everyone thinks he's like purposely doing something with his head or his shoulders, and he's not. They've asked him, he doesn't realize he's doing it. But you'll see this transmission of force that's happening. It's called unweighing. Yeah. And so you'll see this unweighing where his shoulders are actually helping his lower body move. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Very cool. All right. So do you want to take us through maybe like one or two key maybe things that you find that every runner really should be good at? I know there's like so many different types of like warm-ups and pose method ways of helping you run better, but like what are the two top ones that you think are the best, or that you find could maybe plug into the majority of runners that have injuries?
I'm going to take the two simplest ones that we have a tendency to have done as children, that we feel very comfortable with now, because you'll see how these two drills can be used for all the aspects of efficient running or pose running. Okay. So first is skipping.
Okay.
Skipping, first of all, you got to be on one leg. You're on one leg the whole time, so it mimics what we're doing when we're running. But if you work on...
Her name is Denise Smith. Extraordinaire.
You're so
sorry. Somebody's asking who you are, so I'm telling you who that is.
Hi, I'm Denise.
Who you are.
The skipping. So you can use skipping to help you perceive different parts of running. So number one, you can see what it feels like to land underneath your body weight.
Okay.
So I don't know if you mind skipping in place for me right now, Bianca.
I don't mind. I don't have a lot of, well, I have the room, but the video screen isn't
Just do it right in place. That'll be perfect. If you can just do it right in place there. So you guys can see that Bianca's landing right underneath her hip. She's not taking this big stride out. And her foot is being pulled up off the ground from her hamstring. And so this, in running, her foot would, yes, be behind her, but then she's going to be pulling it in. So that gives, the skipping drill gives that perception of what it feels like to pull your foot in towards your body weight. So
not
good.
fall off of this thing.
Don't.
That wouldn't be good.
So this drill is a really easy to drill, and it's kind of fun. Like, it feels easy. It's not like something you have to think about. It's not a very technical. I have really technical drills, and this is one that's just very comfortable for everybody. But we can work on unweighing with this too. Like you said, like really working on getting the shoulders, over exaggerating. Good. Yeah. So drills, just so everybody knows, the role of a drill is that you are over exaggerating a movement to help you perceive how to move. So skipping offers you the ability to feel what it feels like to land underneath your body weight, feel what it feels like to pull your foot up off the ground, feel what it feels like to use your shoulders or unweigh. And then the third thing it does is it helps you feel falling forward. So if you skip and you really work on getting all of your body weight forward and then run right after that, you'll feel that like burst of speed that comes.
Yeah. I find that the falling drills are probably one of the hardest things for some of my patients, because the perception of moving your center of gravity forward is scary.
Oh yeah.
And I think
nobody
a lot
wants
of people
to work on that.
Right. So working on center of gravity drills is one of those things that, it scares people, but it's gonna allow you to hit the gas pedal.
Yes.
So that's going to help instill you getting a little faster.
Yeah. And that's why we could do a whole nother, you and I could do a ton of live chats on this, on just picking like these little elements and how people can feel that and what it feels like and why we should be doing that.
Yes. Okay. So here's our all good stuff from the 60-year-old psychotic fast-paced runner. You know who you are. I know who you are. Now she knows who you are.
All right. 5K, Mike, get off Strava. That's my number one piece of advice.
Busted. Mike, you're so busted. I'm going to get you tomorrow. Okay. So,
and the other drill is backwards running.
Backwards running. Okay.
Yeah. Because again, you can't overstride when you're running backwards.
Right.
True. You cannot, like, you can't try it. Like, don't try it right now. But I dare any of you to try running backwards and try taking an overstride. Like, really take a big stride it out, like your running coach would tell you.
You're gonna wind up falling on your, your
tuchus, right?
Yeah.
So again, and you have to be efficient. You have to be quick with getting those feet on and off the ground. So running backwards also helps you feel what it feels like to pull that foot up off the ground. Yes. What it feels like to fall backwards. Like you said, we are very uncomfortable with falling, but if we can get our brain to be okay with that, we can perceive it better.
Yeah.
And you can also then keep your shoulders nice and loose, and you'll feel very efficient running backwards. You won't feel winded. You won't feel tired. You'll feel very light on your feet. Yeah. And then when you turn and run after that drill, you'll find that you're like, oh, look how much easier that felt. So your brain is so worried about moving your feet on and off the ground backwards. And when you turn and run forwards, it'll just keep that movement pattern up.
Yeah. So I'm going to add in one of my favorite drills is actually the falling drill. And anytime I'm running and I see a tree, like during my warm up, I'm like, hello, tree, can I fall on you? And I don't know if I could actually do it against the wall to show people, but honestly, it's that idea of getting that center of gravity to come forward so that you can feel more comfortable and have some support. So I'm going to see if you can see me against the wall here, but
that's a good angle right there.
Is that a good angle, right?
Yeah.
So the idea here then is to fall forward against the wall.
And making sure that you're falling from your ankle, like pivoting over your ankle, not at your waist. So we don't want you bending forward. Good. Perfect like that.
Right.
So and she's probably on both legs right now.
Yes.
But to make it harder, you can go on one leg.
Okay. I don't know if you can see that, but I'll try to get
That's okay. You're just as long as everybody can see those hips coming forward. Good.
Yeah. And then from here, I'll work on my drill.
Yeah, pull that foot off on the ground in towards your body weight. So in, or pull, 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 pull. Good.
Yeah. While I'm in that forward lean.
Yeah.
So that is my favorite drill. And now I'm going to add the skipping with down the street.
Backwards running.
My
Backwards
running.
My good friend Trudy's on right now, and she just said that she loved the backwards running drill.
Yes, so fun.
It took me a long time to convince her to even do drills, so I'm so happy that she loves something that I taught her.
Oh, good. All right, see? Denise is a damn good teacher, people. All right, so tell everyone how to find you.
So we are Smith PT Run on Instagram. We are on Facebook under Smith Physical Therapy and Running Academy. Our website is smithptrun.com. And thanks to Bianca, we are on TikTok, Smith Physical Therapy and Running Academy. But she inspired me to add one called the Running Guru.
Yes.
So we just started posting again. My daughter Amelia is doing all the videos for me. She loves it because she gets $5 a video.
All right. Oh, maybe I should hire her.
Yeah. Oh, she'll do it in a minute. On TikTok, it's Running Guru. So we've been just experimenting, and it's been fun. It's been a really fun thing for her and I to do together. Yeah. But I have so much stuff I want to share.
Yeah.
Like I just get so excited about all these ideas and things we can do. And so social media is almost a full-time job, I'm finding out.
No doubt.
But we've been at this for 5 years and love every minute of it. And I would really suggest everybody follow Pose Method on Instagram. Their Pose Method. They produce some of the most amazing content that's very easy to understand.
Their YouTube channel is great too.
Yes. And posemethod.com is their website. You can find where there's a local pose coach, maybe hosting a class, or if you want to become a certified running technique specialist, you can find information on that there too.
Yeah. Awesome. All right, my dear.
Thank you so much
so much. I just adore you, and it's so good to see your pretty face, and you're so smart, and I just love learning from you. So thanks
right back at you. We should definitely do one. I have a couple ideas of stuff I want to do with you, so I think it's good that.
Well, now that you're on TikTok, maybe we go TikTok live. I have not broached that one yet.
Wait, there's a TikTok live.
There's a TikTok live. But there's TikTok is a little cray-cray, so maybe, I don't know, we'll go there someday.
You know what? This is getting us out of our comfort zone. So this is
totally out of our comfort zone, but enjoying it every minute. So thank you so much. Thank everyone on here for joining us today. Big love to my sister there in Illinois, and loving her, and everything you've shared with us today has been great. So as this is my little broadcast weekly thing. What was the last website? What's the website?
Posemethod.com.
Posemethod.com. And is it smithpt.com?
SmithPTRun.
SmithPTRun.com. That's where you can find this amazing lady. Okay, so integrate, embrace wellness, and join the collective. I'm going to be here every week, interviewing the most amazing people that I know that I've come to really admire and love. So join me, follow on Instagram, and my website too is sundala.com, SUNDALA. I blog every single day. I post every day on some sort of social media channel.
You're amazing.
Making my videos, doing my thing, and going down the rabbit hole of medical research, because I kind of am obsessed with it right about now. Anyway, all right. Thank you so much. Be good.
Thank you very much.
Happy New Year.
All right,
Bye,
Happy
guys.
New Year, you guys.